I'm Dr. Susan Erich, and welcome to this conservation conversation. These conversations are designed to contemplate our collective journey together and how best we can find and then maintain our individual paths. The ultimate goal is action arising from a shift in perception that all life is sacred, and creating a community of practice that grows and supports each other through our actions. We're delighted you're here. These people in Colombia, called the Mamo, when the Spanish came, a certain small percentage of them were able to escape up to the very high mountains, and they still maintain almost intact the culture of the Aztec and the Inca and the ancient peoples there. They have this interesting thing they do, where it's sort of like the equivalent of looking for the next Dalai Lama. They look for selected children, and this was until extremely recently, and to carry the spirituality forward. And one of the things they do is they'll take a child with their mother's permission and raise it in a cave in complete darkness for 9 years. There are other people there loving the child and nurturing the child. And these children that are selected, could be male or female, are allowed out of the cave at night only. So they're raised in darkness for 9 months. And the reason, 9 years, and the reason for that is because the feeling that when you're born, you're still connected to spirit. And as we start getting active in the world, we start to lose that. And they wanted some people to be the carriers of spirituality, the whole culture, but particularly those children. And so they believed that staying in the darkness for 9 years, teaching them how to communicate telepathically, rather than verbally, not that they couldn't also do that. There's a practice that they did somewhere about 30 years ago. And so if you're very quiet and you're tuned in the darkness and you learn how to be telepathic, you begin to feel things. And so they began to feel how things were going wrong in the outer world, even though they were closed off. And they made contact with a filmmaker. This filmmaker is actually on the board of the One Earth Institute, and asked him to make a film. And the name of the film is From the Heart of the World, The Elder Brothers' Warning. And they think of themselves as the elder brothers and the rest of us as the younger brothers and sisters. That film was made 30 years ago. For those of you who are interested, we can put that there as a resource for you. I'll send you the contact. The more people that can see it, the better. And then they contacted a filmmaker again more recently and said, what happened? No one paid any attention to our warning. And basically we said, well, we're not that alert. And they said, well, and maybe we said it wrong. Maybe we have to say it again. So they made a second film. This one's called Aluna, and this one's available on iTunes. And they decided to take 40 kilometers, and that is kilometers of gold thread, and begin to weave it in such a way that people could begin to see all the interconnections. And that's the second film. And then when the filmmaker was finished, they have a bridge that goes back to where they live, and they told him, closed off the bridge, sorry, you're not welcome here anymore, our job is done. And they went back to their world. So this is one way of people trying to make change. Very reflective, very tuning to the larger forces. I mentioned Tibetan monks do that. In a sense, we do that when we pray or meditate also, except theirs is a concentrated force. And there are some global meditations that we can all join that are online. If any are interested, you can find those online too, from Heart Math and other places where global coherence would begin to meditate to try and change the consciousness, which is really important. I don't know if it's fast enough, given the current crisis. No one knows. Or if it's actually the only thing that's going to work. Earthfire's position is we have to change how we see nature in order to change how we treat it. So it's a paradigm shift of how we see things, which is right in line with all of this. But one of the things that's interesting, when I was talking with Eva last night, we sort of found one another, and she said, it feels like this is happening everywhere. And it is. I'm going to be speaking, I think, in May at something called the Global Repair Conference. That'll be up in Washington State. And they're planning to have at least 500 people come, Indigenous peoples and scientists, people who are trying to repair the coral reefs, people who are trying to work with the whales, people who will be representing, sort of like our Council of All Beings, representing various species, and the scientists coming together, trying to create a movement. What we're all trying to do, in a sense, is create a movement. When I was speaking with Kamran, who is the founder of the Sacred Earth Conference that I spoke at last August in Italy, that's what we talked about too. How do we help coalesce all these forces, all the individual efforts that we make into something that becomes powerful enough to go against the major forces of agriculture and petrochemical and all of those massive, well-organized forces? What do we do? How do we do this? Another friend of mine who's at that conference, I think, just talked about it a little bit, working with the native Aborigines and their idea of a song line, and that we can connect each other through a song line. At that conference that I'll be going to in May, they're asking, how can we repair our relations? One of the things I was thinking of talking about was the story of Teton Totem, a grizzly bear who was paralyzed. And this story should be on the website somewhere. If you can't find it, let me know. And he was, as far as we can tell, I called my friend Penelope Smith to say he's paralyzed. I don't want to put him down. What do we do? This is a very quick synopsis for those of you who haven't heard it before. I was thinking nutrition. God knows what. The vets didn't know anything. They said, put him down. He's going to be, what are you going to do with a 1,000-pound paralyzed grizzly bear? Put diapers on him? And she connected with him long distance. And the only thing I can say is that he started to heal. The next day, teeny bit. Over a couple of months, he became unparalyzed and has been so ever since. What's that connection? How did that happen? Assuming that was, it could be sheer coincidence, it could be. But in fact, it started the next day, and she explained to me how it happened. And then he became very, 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 very sweet, to the point that when people meet him, they break down into tears often. So one connection, I loved him and I look for the help for him, but one connection with Penelope and a bear, he now makes a tremendous impact on the relationship between people and bears, whoever meets him and then whoever hears the story. One relationship of a deep connection. My own relationship of the deep connection with the wolf puppies that made me start Earthfire. So from love and connection, from one love and connection, comes a possibility of beginning to repair our relations with the world. It starts with love, it starts with the heart, and then it goes out. The name of today's, not the name, the first line of today's description was Chelsea caved on bananas. There's Chelsea, the one who caved. She intended not to eat bananas because she saw the tremendous destruction of bananas plantations when she was in Ecuador. You can elaborate on this later, Chelsea, if you want to, but briefly. And she swore never to eat them, but she loves bananas. And every now and then she caves. This is her words. so we were discussing the relationship between one person's simple action, like she really wants to not eat bananas as an action, put the caving aside for the moment, all the way up to the mamo meditating, all these different levels of how we can make an effort. And I had a question to Chelsea, which was, really, what difference does it make if you don't buy a banana or you do? You're one person. This was a discussion, not a position. And she was saying, well, but I think it makes a difference with the consciousness with which you say you're not going to eat bananas. And if you say, what difference does it make? Then it makes each of us powerless. And if 1 million people don't eat a banana, that makes a difference. So that's just, and I bet she's never going to bring a banana into the office again. So that is one way we can begin to support one another if we have a position that we take and say out loud, I'm not going to do this. It kind of makes it more clear that we're not going to do it. So these are just ideas I had about going from the, I wouldn't say sublime to ridiculous, because Chelsea's actions aren't ridiculous. They're very specific, wanting a banana. How do we help one another stick with it? How do we help one another not cave? How do we take our own equivalent action of meditating to try and make the world better? The most immediate crisis, well, there are many, but one very immediate crisis other than climate change is the statistics now are something like we've lost 60% of wildlife. The single most important thing we can do for wildlife other than stop climate change is to save land for them. So if we take one particular focus, I mean, Chelsea's not eating bananas because the land's being destroyed is good, but the land is already there, semi-destroyed. We have to save what land we can that's still alive and vibrant, or restore it for wildlife, or we'll have nothing. So very specifically, going all the way through this whole story, I'm saying we need to save land. What can we each do to help save land? That's one of the primary actions we can take. And there can be a teeny-weeny action locally. If it gets picked up by a newspaper, it gets larger. So those are my thoughts for today. A little random, but well, it's snowing outside. So I open it for conversation, including you, Chelsea, to defend yourself.
I don't think there's any defense necessary. I think it's if anything, I'm happy to share the story, because I think in our own part, we've all gone through moments of making a decision or, a goal for ourselves to act more sustainably, and then perhaps faulted on it. So I think that this is a very human thing to do. So I would love to hear, though, thinking of that, how that instance and that story drove Susan and I to kind of come into this deeper conversation of, does one person, can we make a difference? And, should we act in that one small way? And just to hear all of your thoughts on that. So, I will give everyone now the ability to unmute themselves. Again, you may do so by clicking on the little microphone to the bottom left on your Zoom screen. When you do unmute yourself, please introduce yourself and say where you're joining us from. As well, just be conscious of any background noise. Do try to silence that. And then also just be conscious of your time limit. We want to give everyone the ability to speak if they so desire tonight. So I will do that now, and everyone is able to share.
And for those of you who are new to the conversation, silence is fine, because if you're having deep thoughts, sometimes it takes a while to think them and not to want to interrupt people. So don't worry if there are periods of silence as we think about what we talked about.
Hi, I'm Dawn from Moab.
Hi, Dawn.
Hi, how are you, Susan? So one of the things that what you just said made me think about was it's really hard to decide what you're going to do in order to make a decision of things to change, because there's just so much that needs to be changed. And when you think of I'm just one person and what can I really do that can make a difference, there's so many different choices, and then it gets overwhelming almost to the point that you just kind of cave back into the I'm just going to stay doing what I'm doing because you don't know what else to do. That's kind of where I see myself currently. But yeah, that was really my thought right now.
Hello?
Hi.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi.
Hi.
My first time.
Welcome.
As there's problems, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'll just speak. I think if I were younger, I would also be feeling really powerless over all the choices. First of all, I want to say that. I respect you, Don, for being able to say that. Personally, I think what's really important is that you try and that you care on a daily basis, just how you treat people that you meet on the street. When you treat people with loving kindness and from your heart, it's a start. I think it gives you a way forward so you don't have to feel so confused, and maybe something like what you might find a calling from your heart. Kindness, Buddhists talk about all the time, loving kindness, that's the place to start, I really think. And in my own life, I've done a lot of volunteerism for people. I've been acupuncturist, and I did free acupuncture in cities, served homeless dinners at Thanksgiving. I mean, when I was 11, I started reading for Head Start in Santa Monica, California. It's something that I just had in my heart. So I think that it's wonderful and important, all these big events and huge things people are doing, of like the Lummi Nation is working on salmon restoration in the Salish Sea near where I live. And what Susan is talking about, those older civilizations that have given us the wisdom of how to connect on a higher level across ether, I don't know what you want to call it. But I still maintain that the real basis and a place to start for everybody is from the heart. Learn. There's gut feelings, there's heart feelings, and there's mind feelings. And we've lost the heart feeling. I think women haven't. We've been fortunate in that. So I would say go with your heart. Susan, maybe I'll see you. I live in Port Townsend, so I'll see you at the Earthfire Con.
Great.
That's what I have to say. How do I get off? Just hit it again? Or?
No, just stop talking.
That reminded me of an experience I recently had, Jill, where it was in the fall, so I guess a few months ago, where I was running in between classes because I was going to be late. So I was very much in the human world and my own thoughts. And it had just rained. And so I looked down, and there was, where it had rained a few hours ago, but the sun was out now and it was shining nice and bright and things were drying up. And I looked down, and there was a worm in this massive, expansive area of concrete. And, you know, as I'm like thinking about being late from school, I realized that this worm could potentially dry up, you know, as you often see on the sidewalks. And so I stopped and I picked it up, and I found a nice spot in the grass and some shade and put him back. And I, you know, was thinking to myself, was proud of myself, thinking, wow, maybe I saved that worm's life. And then I kind of laughed, and I was like, you know, if anything, maybe that worm is helping to save my life a little bit, because it allowed me a moment out of my day to come back to what was important and what was real, and, you know, and just realize that I had been totally consumed in you know, the human thing, and that worm had big issues, you know, it had real problems, and I was just going to be late for a class. And so it just came back to, you know, the smallest thing that I could do was actually really big for one individual being. So I think it is important to always take time out of our day and realize what we can do.
Hi, Mitzi.
Hey, Susan. Hello, everybody. Good to be together.
Yeah.
I know I always talk about my gardening and what I do here for the pollinators. I live in the Midwest, so there's a huge corridor for monarch butterflies, and we have a lot of native bees. So my part, and I think everybody can do this wherever they are in, you know, the United States. There's different species of milkweeds. They're indigenous to every part of the country. Plant a little patch of milkweed. Think about, you know, a part of your garden where you could, you know, incorporate native flowers. I know I was big on the, you know, the English country gardens and the, you know, and it didn't work here. And I was like, well, you know, this is the land here is telling me something. And I went totally native. And I tell you, I have a microcosm here, and I feel, you know, that is doing its part in helping, you know, our pollinators. Without the pollinators, what do we have? You know, we don't have food. We don't have, it's an important issue right now. I've shared seeds of some of my native plants that I have with other neighbors. So, you know, along my street, other people are planting the same indigenous plants. So I feel good about that. My thought this year for me too is giving up plastics to help the world. I still, you know, I try to, you know, get paper bags, but once in a while, you know, I'm at the grocery store once in a while, I'll get plastic because it's quicker or whatever. But I really want to give that up and just totally have that out of my life. And I think, you know, as more people do that, that could make a huge difference, you know, in what's going on, like, you know, the waste that we're seeing in the oceans and what plastics can do to the environment. And I also feel like, you know, us joining together, you know, we have the heartstrings, you know, joined together, we are making a difference. So it's a good thing. That's a wonderful thing. And I had a thought, Susan, have you ever thought of doing maybe and I'm not good at this, but maybe a Facebook page for, I know Earthfire has a Facebook page, but maybe for our talks, for the, you know, the conservation conversations, and people could join in and, you know, maybe share some links that they come upon, you know, and I don't know if that would be an idea, you know, just to keep in touch between the calls.
Thanks. I'm not any good at it, but I can ask someone to look into that. Unless you'd like to do it, Mitzi.
I'm not very techy, but maybe if you I don't know. I mean, yeah, I just thought maybe it would be a way to, you know, we could, you know, keep in touch, you know, in between the calls maybe.
I think it's a good idea.
And share links. You know, I've come upon some links, and I'm sure all of us do as we're, you know, perusing the internet, and maybe that, you know, that we could share together.
We just started something on it'll be in the next e-newsletter this Friday, I think, called a seed swap. And this idea of seed ideas, where we can put links. So if you can send us, whatever, any of you send us any links you have, we can put it in there. Really neat stuff about that 15-year-old Asperger's syndrome girl who spoke from, was it Sweden or Denmark? We probably all read it, talking so clearly about climate change. So that's a great idea.
And I just want to ask you, Susan, have you heard of Aldo Leopold?
Oh, yeah.
Because I found some wonderful things on him, and I don't know, you know, maybe share that with other people in the group, and wonderful ideas on, you know, the earth and what we can do.
It's a lovely, warm idea, Mitzi. So let's explore that. Call me when we're sometime this week or whenever, and let's explore that.
I will do that, Susan. Thank you.
And unless other people want to have to say something to that, I was going to make a comment, pulling together a little bit of what Dawn and Jill said. Does someone else want to speak first to what Mitzi said? So Dawn, you said you felt overwhelmed because you don't know where to start. And Jill said, start with your heart. And that's kind of what I was trying to say so I fell in love with wolf puppies. And that was the founding of Earthfire. It doesn't have to be wolf puppies. It could be a worm or a spider or a dog or a cat. But once you start to love, that's the connection that starts life in terms of enhancing life, saving life, working with life. That's the connection. And the step we often don't take, and this is a natural direction for us, Dawn, if this is helpful to you, whatever we fall in love with is an opening into the world, and an opening that if we follow, we'll find a way. So if it's a dog that we love, we start dog rescue. If it's a dog we love, we start looking into wolves. If it's a dog we love, we start looking into pet therapy. It doesn't really matter what the living being is that we connect, and it doesn't even matter that much what we do. It's that we do something based on love, and that I don't know whether the right word is not pushes us into action or drives us into action or leads us into action. But loving alone is not enough, but it's the beginning. So one guideline, actually I said wolf puppies for me, but what happened for me originally was a scrawny little kitten that was thrown out of a car, I believe, and crawled onto a farm where I was at the time. That's what started the fundamental journey for me. The profound love I had for that animal just opened and opened and opened. The wolf puppies were actually the next 2 or 3 steps down. So I was a scrawny little kitten. So if we listen to our hearts, like you said, Jill, that will give us the direction. I had no idea it'd start Earthfire. You have no idea what's going to happen if you follow what it is that you love, be it a plant or whatever it is. It naturally leads to expansion, to joining in, to connection with the universe, to connection with living things. And then we begin to feel and see what it is that we might be able to do.
Well, and so listening to what you and Jill and Mitzi have said kind of make me realize that there is a lot of things that I do in my life that really, I guess, does make a difference, but I just don't realize that it does. So I always do volunteering with animals. I like Chelsea was saying with the worm, I'm one of those people that if I see a bug that's on a cement wall, I'm the one who takes it over onto a plant. So I think part of it is just realizing that the little things you do really are big, even if they are little. So Chelsea, you saying that, it's like you have to realize, you have to understand how things are. So that it's really very helpful to hear everything from you guys.
And then if you move an insect onto a plant, maybe you follow that into learning more about insects and thinking of what it is you can do to stop the current collapse, right? So it's a direction. Whatever it is that attracts us is a direction. If we follow, it's almost like, if you want to be mystical about it, almost like the path we're supposed to follow. Or maybe it's just serendipity that we fall in love with something, but it's a falling in love and then following through as far as we can take it.
Yeah, so Susan, may I address what you just said?
Please.
I feel like there's large causes and large people and people that are doing movements, and maybe it's not enough soon enough, but I think the greatest element that you can have is individual people that change the way they're hearted, have loving kindness in their everyday life. I really think that is as important as the Lummi Nation saving the salmon along the coast, because there becomes a tipping point of enough people that have that loving kindness in their heart. Even though the big stuff, the work really needs to be done. In my own personal life, I feel like all the time that I spent serving homeless people and volunteering, doing acupuncture was a larger thing for me. It never got to be, it was big. I feel it was. And I still do acupuncture for really inexpensive. Help somebody gets off my table, stand up, I feel better. I've helped. I volunteer still. I'm never going to be the head of Earthfire Institute. I never will be the person that goes to speak at conferences. But my small life of the loving kindness that I've given other people as much as I could, help them, I think this is important. So I also think when people are young, that they learn to spread that love and kindness, it makes a difference. And if they get to the point where that love becomes a passion that they can do a larger movement with, that's really wonderful too. But I think we should really honor, I mean, all of us have to do things that aren't perfect within our scope with what we're doing in the world. Traveling around, for instance, going to these big conferences, you get in jets, all that jet fuel. We live here in the world. Loving kindness. To me, that's the ticket. Thank you.
I think what you said is really important. Every one of us does what we can, and you said small, it's not small. It's different. And if every one of us does that, so I was taking a position at somewhere in between where Chelsea and bananas, you and acupuncture, these things are not actually small. For us in our lives, they're big. And we don't know the energetic imprint of it. What I was trying to suggest is that many of us actually do, however, limit ourselves out of fear for what, especially women, for how much further we could take it. And so I just wanted to encourage people to not limit ourselves out of fear. If it stays at bananas and acupuncture, and that's the natural extension for a person, that's just fine. But often people stop without going any further because of various fears. And I think the times call for us to try as much as possible to go beyond those and stretch ourselves as much as we can. And being head of Earthfire Institute is no big thing. It's a teeny weeny institute, by the way. Big ideas. So, other people. We haven't heard from you, Marta.
Funny you said that, Susan, because I was just going to jump in. I think Dawn really made me think with what she said at first. And I agree with Jill, too, that we need to come from our heart. And sometimes that's such a nebulous, almost new age, come from your heart, which I totally agree, Jill. I'm not saying that, but sometimes people they think, well, what does that mean to come from my heart? And I think, for me, it's been a case of following what fascinates me and what I want to do. So when I decided to move years ago from New York State, where I was born, to Florida, my last name is Waterman, and that's no mistake. I'm very interested in water and the potential lack of it in the world and the capitalization of water. And so before I moved to Florida, I did a lot of studying about the problem in Florida. There's so many people that move there, and it really has put a strain on the fresh water in Florida. So I made up my mind and made a promise to myself and to the universe that once I got there, that I would find some way to offset the physical presence that I was going to add to the problem. And so it took me a while after I moved down there because I needed to get work. And so, once I got myself established so that I could make some money, I began to just look into different ways to volunteer. And there was, close to me, was a nature park, which is in the Everglades, and it's the northernmost reach of the Everglades. And it supplies the water for Palm Beach. but it's a nature reserve. So I went and I was like, I loved it. It was just so wonderful. And I was really drawn to it. And I remember being there, and I saw this man talking to two older women, and he was saying, yeah, I go out there, and he was pointing beyond the walkway and saying, I go out there every week and I remove exotic pest plants. And I thought, wow, that sounds really awesome. So I waited until the two women walked away, and I approached the man and I said, do you go out there every week? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, could I do that? He said, yeah, be here next Wednesday morning with hip boots and a machete. So I did. I went and I bought machete and hip boots, and I met him the following Wednesday morning, and I ended up spending 5 years. He mentored me, and we removed Lygodium, which is an invasive vine, and we moved Melucocet. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, I don't know how aware the rest of you are, but those are enormous, enormous problems that have completely upset the ecological balance in Florida. And it's growing geometrically. It's terrible. And sometimes I felt like, wow, this is just like spitting in the ocean. It's like, I'm out there for 5 hours once a week and, barely making an impact in one tiny, tiny little region of one county in Florida. But then I thought, well, if everybody would do this that lives in Florida, particularly if everybody that wasn't a Florida native, and the guy that helped me was, what a difference it would make if everybody in Florida spent 5 hours of their week doing that. So 2 things I'm trying to say. One is that every little thing that we do has repercussions. So maybe somebody else got inspired to do that because they heard my story. It actually went in the newspaper. But secondly, what I'm trying to say, and Dawn, you made me think of this, is that I just did that because I wanted to be outside, and I love the swamp, and I love the heat. You get really, really hot and stuff, but I was following something. So this is my heart, Jill, like you were saying, but it was like what I wanted to do, what was really, really super fun. And once I moved back to New York State, I found other things to do that also are super fun, that also help, I believe, help other people, help the planet. And maybe the animist in me, but I think that the planet knows. And she thanks us in mystical ways when we help her. So that's all I'm going to say. You probably think I'm crazy, but whatever.
No, wrong place for you to be crazy. Everyone else here is too. Warren, Susan, Jimmy, Kobe.
Looks like Jean.
Jean, hi.
Hi, how are you? I just want to tell you that in 1997, and ironically, I was cleaning boxes and found a piece of paper that gave me the date on it. A friend of mine, Cass, did energy healing on my pug dog who had a torn ACL. The regular vet said there was nothing that could be done. The dog was in extreme pain. I couldn't handle watching him, called Cass. So we brought Pug over, and Cass works with his pet, which is a black Labrador, and within less than an hour and 10 minutes, my dog with the torn ACL that we were waiting to be completely torn so that the vet could do something, which is not anything I could do. I couldn't just sit and wait. The dog was healed. The dog jumped off the table, went outside. My little boy dog lifted his leg like nothing happened. He never did go back to the vet, and I just found the vet bill. for just, having the dog examined. Ironically, just a couple weeks ago, earlier this month, my daughter's grandma down in Florida was hurting, and we were having trouble finding resource people to help her. And I found Kef, and we just visited Kef, and there he was with a new generation of a black lab. And instead of the pug, we had Kef work on grandma, and that also was very successful. I have just done the best I can on a daily basis to go forward, and a project I'm working on right now is to give assistance at a school for gifted students to come up with new programs under the tutelage of the upper school director. I managed to get that opportunity because I decided that we needed to update school curriculums, and I couldn't get the attention of anybody to see what all of us on this call are seeing. And people could not open their minds to the new paradigm shift and what we need to do and how we need to take the initiative. And yes, we must trust our hearts and go forward and do those things. So people would be doing things, but it wasn't coming together, and it needed more leadership, and it needed some materials being available, and then some very heartfelt teachers would likely pick it up and run with it. So I am also participating in a graduate school program for gifted education. People from the school recommended me for the program, and then the irony is I was in my first 2 courses, and I realized that my state of Michigan does not even honor gifted education. We got rid of the legislation. And we no longer have gifted ed in our state, which is a plus and a minus. But anyway, to make a long story short, I think we can do a lot to connect the younger generation with the older generation, have them learn from the older generation, and our so-called Gen Zs, some of our millennials, are very open to that because they see it. They see it sometimes easier, these old souls that they are. And right now, I'm looking for places to recommend that we take 10th and 11th graders to have a few days experience of being in a different culture. And it wasn't until this phone call that I realized it could be taking them to a conference. It could be maybe visiting to see Earthfire. I don't know. But to give them an opportunity to be in what it is we want created here on the planet. And all it takes is them being in that environment to live it. Then they experience the cultural difference and they bring it back with them. And I think if we get it started, it'll grow hugely. Anyway, my daughter and I also took a little mouse, as I'm thinking about the young lady with the worm. We captured a mouse and captured him live and took him out into the woods because we're not the type to kill any creature. Thank you.
My immediate reaction, go ahead, someone else.
I wanted to tell Jean about something that is happening in Olympia, Washington, and I'm hoping to start maybe working on it near Port Townsend. There are programs to teach permaculture, earth restoration, that are going on at Peninsula College. There's a dirt rich school in my area. And in Olympia, Paul Serafino is his name, has Earth Restoration Guild, where they're doing projects with the parks. And they're taking the students from the schools to come out with their muck boots and their shovels to help work on restoration. And I don't know where you are, where you live, but maybe there is something like that where you live. This is the greatest thing I think youth can learn and find a passion about, is to actually work on the restoration project. And these things are being organized between students and teachers at ecosystem restoration. The land that they're doing down in Olympia is owned by the state parks. So anyway, since you're involved in a school, I love mentioning this, and maybe you can start something like that in your area.
Thank you very much. I happen to have a child who is very connected with animals, and I'm finding that there's fewer locations where that that heartfelt, I almost want to say skill, of being connected with nature, with animals, is also a piece that I think needs to be offered in addition to what you're talking about. And I thank you for that suggestion.
My first reaction when you said take them into another culture was take them into a forest. The culture doesn't have to be human.
I agree.
And the other thing, which is just a thing of mine, when you said it, and I'll say it briefly so I think someone else wants to speak, as a fantasy of mine is to go into the schools, which I don't have time to do, but you are, and make sure there are classes in where food comes from. Nobody knows that. Well, not nobody, they don't, not vividly. And what an incredible difference it would make if we begin to understand where food comes from, how it's grown, what the impacts are. So that was just a quick thought. Someone else wanted to speak?
Thank you.
I'll add just two quick things to that. I think at the essence of what Jean you brought up is, yeah, two important things that but what Susan mentioned as well is kids don't necessarily have to go out into another culture, but we need them to fall in love with, wildness in every sense. And that can be at a local park, that can be at a community garden, that can be going to another state, another culture, to widen their perspective. But yeah, it's important that we redefine, our relationship and just the definition of nature. We seem to think of it as something outside of us, but really as it's just, it's always there and we're a part of it too. And helping to the younger generation to see that, and not, in a way discriminate of what's, sexy nature and what's just, nature outside our front door. And then the second part too is just the importance of education. And it reminded me of, and I've done environmental education with ages 5 through 14 for the past few years. So it's a passion of mine. But I think it's even beyond that. It's, tonight we're talking about what we do, these small changes we make in our lives. But even sharing it, educating anyone, our neighbor, our family, as well as the children around us, and just how important it is to not only make those personal changes, but to explain to people why we are doing this, and if it's coming from a place of love, it won't feel as threatening. It won't feel, like we're saying, you're not doing this. It's just saying, I'm doing this because this is where my heart's taking me. And maybe that's going to, include them or at least inspire them to do it in their own way. And with that, I just want to note that we are coming to the end of the hour. So if someone hasn't spoken tonight and would like to, please do share. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, Ginny, Susan, Warren, Kobe.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
This is Warren.
Hi, Warren.
This is the first time I've been in anything like this, so that's why part of the reason I haven't said much. I live in Victor, Idaho, and I've been to Earthfire several years ago when I helped John put up electric wires for the grizzly bear pens.
Ah,
wonderful.
So it's been quite a while since I've been there, but it's interesting that you talked about your wolf puppies, because I have a real soft spot in my heart, for wolves. I had a dog that I brought out here who was most people thought she was a wolf, and I didn't argue with them too much, but she was really a Malamute Husky German Shepherd mix, and I lost her just about 2 years ago. She was 15 years old, ruptured both ACLs, and got along fine. I couldn't have had them fixed because the rehab wouldn't have. She wouldn't survive the rehab. They had to be crated, I think, for 6 weeks. And she was just too big an animal, too strong to, not just mess everything up. So I ended up with a dog that sat funny, walked funny, but could still hike and was a joy to be with. So I am actually now looking to maybe somehow get involved with one of the wolf dog rescue centers. And in fact, Susan, I've been planning on calling you to see what's going on over there, because I know you did back. This goes back like 4 or 5 years ago, I think. You had a few wolves there then.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still have wolves?
We do. Give me a call.
I will.
I can't live without wolves.
Because I know. What's that?
I can't live without wolves. Highly inconvenient, but I can't live without.
Well, I could never go back to a small puppy or a small dog again after having this one.
They all have their importance and charm. Yeah. But
yep. Well, another thing about dogs and what people have done. My mother, we had a dog once that had back problems a couple of times. Once when we lived in Indiana, she took him to the osteopath that I went to as a child to have it worked on. And he was happy to do it. Didn't charge anything. And then we moved to Connecticut, and the dog had back problems again, so she just looked in the yellow pages and called up an osteopath and got the dog fixed. So, I mean, there's a lot of people in professions you would never expect would be available to, help situations like that.
Thank you.
I'll shut
Thank
up
you
now.
for daring to talk first time.
I'll give you a call.
Kobe, Jenny, Susan.
I just want to say thanks for letting me be a part of this. It was really fabulous. I probably have a lot to say, but my thoughts are way ahead of what my mouth can put together. So I did think about you today. I watched a documentary. It's just a 12-minute thing. This guy that was in the Vietnam War, and while he was in the war, the only thing that kept him looking beyond that situation was a map of Montana and Wyoming, and it grew into this where now he's trying to save grizzly habitat. So it falls in that it starts small and then becomes something much bigger. So
Yeah.
So I just would hope that people see that your small action is very meaningful, because you're being mindful in making those small steps. It does matter.
Are you talking about Doug Peacock?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, it's a little 12-minute video that he's done, and I think it's called In Grizzly Country.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah, Doug's written a lot of books, and he's pretty incredible.
Yes, that's him.
I can share that with everyone.
And we can also share the 2 movies that I talked about early on for those who are interested.
Mm-hmm.
It's Marta again. I already spoke, but I just wanted to share with you something that was pretty remarkable from the last conversation. I think it was the last one, when you had Linda Bender. And I had said something to her about that I was worried about my cat, that she's getting frail, and I was worried about her dying. And Linda said to me, your cat, I see your cat snuggling with you right up by your face, by your neck. That night, when my cat jumped on the bed with me, instead of like being down by my feet or by my knees, she came up and got right by my neck, and she slept there every single night since. Had never, ever done that before. And Linda somehow saw that she wanted to do that, and I opened up to it. I mean, I would have been open to her doing that before, but she just never had done it. And I just think that's super remarkable. It's just like crazy, because it didn't just happen that one night. It just has kept happening ever since. And it's sweet. And I realized too, and I told my cat, okay, I'm not going to worry about, you can go whenever you want to go. I mean, it just has changed my perspective about the possibility the inevitability that she will die someday. I just kind of let go of my fear of that, gave her, like she needs it, but yeah, I gave her permission to do what she needs to do and doesn't have to try to stay alive just for me, because I had said that to her before, like, please don't die, you know. So it just was really remarkable. And I did write to Linda afterwards and let her know that that happened, but I wanted to share that with you. Thank you.
In view of what you just said, you might enjoy talking to Kath Luke regarding his dog, who, you know, he just gives up a body and comes back in another body, and it's the same spirit. So is that your cat, question mark, question mark?
What's the person's name?
His name is Kath Luke, and as we're talking, I don't want to consume all the time here, but I can...
If you want to email me, I will make sure that that gets sent out in the thank you that I send out.
Okay, sure. Be glad to.
It's just Chelsea@earthfireinstitute.org. Well, thank you all so much for being with us tonight. We honor this time that you've shared with us, and we look forward to seeing you at the next conversation, which will be on February 20th, again at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. If you are not a part of our newsletter, or if you're not subscribed, that's definitely the best way to keep in touch about upcoming conversations and just events in general. Again, tonight's conversation has been recorded and will be put onto our website. And I will also send out a thank you email with the materials that we've talked about. And then lastly, please do consider supporting us through a donation, which you may do on our website as well. We would love to continue to offer these for free, and your support goes a long way. So thank you again for your presence tonight, and we hope to see you next time.
Conservation Conversations are a production of the Earthfire Institute, a wildlife sanctuary and rehabilitation center whose mission is to change how people see and therefore treat wildlife and nature. Join us as we work toward becoming a committed and supportive community of all beings. Earthfire depends on your donations to continue these conversations. You can donate at our website, www.earthfireinstitute.org. The soundscapes are by Wild Sanctuary Presents, Bernie Krause and Philip Arberg. Thank you for listening. Please join us for these monthly conversations.